Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most catastrophic events in human history, the Black Death. And I know what you're thinking. You've probably heard about the plague before, maybe seen some movies or read about it in school. Let me tell you something. The reality of what life was like during those dark years from 1347 to 1351 was far more horrifying than anything Hollywood has ever shown you. Picture this. You're living in a bustling medieval city in 1347. Maybe it's London, Paris, or Florence. Life isn't easy, but it's predictable. You know your place in society, you go to church, you work your trade, you raise your family. Then one day, ships arrive at your port, and within weeks, half your neighbors are dead. Not from war, not from famine, but from something invisible, something that seems to kill at random. That's the Black Death, and it's about to turn your entire world upside down. Now, you might be wondering how this nightmare even started. The plague didn't just appear out of nowhere. It followed the trade routes that connected Europe to Asia. Those same routes that brought silk, spices, and exotic goods also brought death in the form of infected fleas riding on black rats. The bacterium Yersinia pestis had been brewing in the steppes of Central Asia for decades, and by the 1340s, it was ready to explode across the known world. Here's something that might shock you. The first Europeans to encounter the plague were uneven on European soil. In 1346, the Mongol army was besieging the trading post of Kaffa in Crimea, where Genoese merchants had established a colony. When the plague struck the Mongol forces, they did something that was basically the world's first biological warfare attack. They catapulted the infected corpses of their own soldiers over the city walls. Can you imagine being inside those walls, watching decomposing bodies rain down from the sky, not knowing that this was just the beginning of your nightmare? The Genoese merchants who escaped Kaffa brought more than just their lives with them. They brought the plague. When their ships reached Constantinople, Messina, and other Mediterranean ports in late 1347, they were literally death ships. Some vessels arrived with their entire crews dead, drifting ghost ships that brought terror to every port they entered. But let me tell you what it was actually like to contract this disease, because the reality is more horrifying than any horror movie. There were 3 forms of plague, and each one was a different kind of hell. The most common was bubonic plague, and if you caught this, you'd have first noticed swollen lymph nodes called buboes. Imagine lumps the size of apples growing in your armpits, groin, and neck. These buboes would turn black and ooze pus and blood. The pain was so excruciating that victims couldn't bear to be touched. Then there was pneumonic plague, which attacked the lungs. Victims would cough up blood-tinged sputum, literally drowning in their own bodily fluids. This form was airborne, spread by coughing and sneezing, which meant it could tear through communities even faster than the bubonic form. And finally, there was septicemic plague, where the bacteria invaded the bloodstream directly. This was usually fatal within hours. Victims would develop dark patches on their skin as their blood vessels hemorrhaged, hence the name Black Death. Now, here's what really gets to me about this plague: the speed at which it killed. We're not talking about a slow, wasting disease that gave families time to prepare. The Black Death could kill you in 3 to 5 days from the first symptoms. Imagine going to bed feeling slightly under the weather and being dead before the week was out. Entire families would be wiped out in a matter of days, leaving houses full of corpses with no one left alive to bury them.
Oh.
The smell alone must have been unbearable. With so many people dying so quickly, proper burial became impossible. In Paris, they ran out of consecrated ground within months. Bodies were stacked like cordwood in mass graves, and when those filled up, they started burning the dead in huge pyres that burned day and night. The chronicler Jean de Vignette wrote that the smoke from burning bodies was so thick it blocked out the sun in some areas. But you want to know what's really chilling? The randomness of it all. The plague didn't discriminate based on social class, age, or moral character. Kings died alongside peasants, priests alongside sinners, children alongside the elderly. This randomness shattered medieval people's understanding of divine justice. They believed that God punished the wicked and protected the righteous. But the plague seemed to strike good and evil people with equal ferocity. Let me paint you a picture of what daily life looked like in a plague-struck city. Imagine waking up each morning not knowing if you or your loved ones would be alive by evening. The normal rhythms of life ground to a halt. Markets closed because there weren't enough healthy people to run them. Churches locked their doors because priests were dying faster than they could be replaced. Courts stopped functioning because judges and lawyers were dead or had fled. In Florence, Giovanni Boccaccio wrote that people abandoned all social norms. Some became extremely religious, believing that penance and prayer might save them. Others went in the opposite direction, deciding that if death was inevitable, they might as well enjoy their final days. They would break into abandoned houses, drink the wine, eat the food, and live like there was no tomorrow, because for many of them, there wasn't. The psychological impact was devastating. People didn't just fear death, they feared that civilization itself was ending. Some believed it was the biblical apocalypse, that the world was literally coming to an end. Others thought it was God's punishment for humanity's sins. The fact that no one understood what caused the disease made it even more terrifying. Doctors were completely helpless, often dying themselves while trying to treat patients. And here is something that shows you just how desperate people became: the scapegoating and violence that erupted. When people can't understand why something terrible is happening, they look for someone to blame. Jews became the primary targets, accused of poisoning wells or conspiring with the devil to spread the plague. Entire Jewish communities were massacred across Europe, from England to Poland. In Strasbourg, they burned 2,000 Jews alive in the city cemetery on Valentine's Day 1349. The irony is that Jewish communities often had lower plague mortality rates. It's probably due to better hygiene practices, but this only made people more suspicious of them. The economic impact started immediately. With so many people dying, there was no one left to work the fields, run the shops, or maintain basic services. Trade collapsed because merchants were afraid to travel. Money became almost worthless in some areas because there was nothing to buy and no one to sell to. Some regions reverted to a barter economy almost overnight. By the end of 1347, just 1 year after reaching Europe, the Black Death had already begun reshaping the continent in ways that would last for centuries. This wasn't just a health crisis. It was a complete breakdown of medieval society. And we're only getting started with this nightmare. In our next part, we'll dive deep into the daily horrors of living through the peak plague years, the complete breakdown of social order, and the desperate attempts people made to understand and survive this incomprehensible catastrophe. Trust me, it gets much worse before it gets better.